So let's maybe go do that one. Let's do the Dupreeh one, shall we, Pimp? So obviously, another player you've played with in your career.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because obviously the rumours he goes to Nip and rejoins, we get the double D combo again, right?
That'd be nice. I think for Dupreeh's perspective, it makes a lot of sense. I think if Astralis is going to break down anyway, and he has to find a new home, I think he finds some sort of comfort within Sweden. I believe he's been staying in Sweden a lot. I believe he's been. Did he have a Swedish girlfriend at some point? I'm not too sure about.
I think at some point in the early days he did.
Yeah, I think he has some connection to Sweden anyway, and he's a very goofy guy. Obviously loves Device. I've had a great relationship playing with him for what, 7 years, all the way from Copenhagen Wolves to TSM to Astralis. So to see Astralis lose Device and for Dupreeh to lose Astralis, for Dupreeh to lose Device, I think that was the one player who took it to heart the most.
Sure.
So to see them reunite on NIP makes sense from a personal level, from a personal perspective. I know Dupreeh is a guy who can also adjust to, let's say he has to live in Stockholm. I don't think that's going to be a problem for him, or even Pendle from Stockholm to Copenhagen easy. From a Counter-Strike perspective, I think that's the perfect signing for NIP. I think that would be beautiful. I am not a big fan of the approach they're doing right now with bringing in these talents left, right, and center. I think LNC has been doing a decent job. I think CTR was simply not ready for it. And I even spoke to Jonas, the GM of NIP, and I was like, dude, you gotta, before we knew the whole thing with the major, you got a major coming up in Sweden, right, with NIP. You finally have a team where you invest into Device, you bring in a star player, a player that is undoubtedly gonna make you better. You put down $1 million, you give him a big fat contract, and you're still jeopardizing the future, and you're still jeopardizing the immediate success of NIP by bringing in these lone players. He even told me that there were possibilities of signing, legit players that already proved their worth on top tier Counter-Strike, whether they would be Swedish, Danish, or some international player, don't know. But they wanted to stick to the whole, regime of bringing up talent through the ranks, which I respect from a business perspective, instead of having to go out and spend a shit ton of money on buying players 24/7, But as you said, Thorin, I think it's 1 or 2, maybe 3 years out in the future before we get to see the academy teams established enough that we can start to bring up players through the ranks, right? So right now you have a major coming up for NIP. You have to find success. You did very well in the first RMR. You're going to qualify for that major. You don't want to jeopardize the success. You don't want to jeopardize bringing over Device, paying $1 million for him or whatever you paid for him, and not have a team that can compete at that major. You want to sign someone who is class. You want to sign someone who has the stability and who had the level to perform at the very highest level, and you get that in Dupreeh. Even from a player perspective, the role he could fit into makes perfect sense. I think Dupreeh going to NIP could be one of the best signings, not only for NIP, but by the rankings of the best signings ever in Counter-Strike, if they make that work. I think it makes an awful lot of sense for me, and I think that would make NIP competitive at the very highest level. Rest is a fantastic player. Device, he's immediate class, and I think Dupreeh still got it. Hampus, to me, one of the most underrated in-game leaders. Sure. I think Threat as a coach is a fantastic coach. I think he's very good, very, his knowledge about the game. He reminds me a bit about Hunten in some areas. I think he's very, very articulated as well. I think NIP has the potential to be one of the best teams in the world if they secure Dupreeh. So to me, it makes an awful lot of sense.
Right, there's actually breaking news, which I won't mention now because obviously me and Dust are going to give our thoughts on the Dupreeh move. But if you just go and look on hltv.org, there's a move for complexity. And what we'll do is this. Look at it now, Pimp. Me and Dust will give our thoughts on Dupreeh, and then we'll do this move actually because it'll be in the episode whenever it is tomorrow probably. So, right, Dust, what do you think of the Dupreeh to Nip move?
I
if
like
it
it from
indeed
this
happens, obviously.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think from this perspective, it's the perfect move. I really agree, with everything that Pimp basically said. I mean, you already brought in Device. That's your marquee signing, right? You brought in the best opper as far as fundamentals go, probably in the world, and biggest consistency track record of any player in CSGO history, most likely. So you have that, but you have to reinforce that investment. You can't just live out on that alone, because that's not enough to make this team what it needs to be a loyal contender, right? So from the NIP side of things, you have to invest deeper. And I think that building around Hampus as your IGL is great, because there's not many other IGL options out there unless you somehow suck or glaive over as well. And he does frag pretty well. You have Threat as the coach infrastructure behind that team. I think that's great. But here's the problem with NIP. One, Plotsky just massively fell off. I'm not sure what the hell happened, but after a few good events, he had a couple of bad ones that he's never really recovered since. The LNZ guy's not been around long enough to really trust how good he can be long term for this team, in my opinion. So I think that in the end of the day, probably both those players are going to go at some point, right? But let's say you're going to just replace one of them for now. It would make sense to bring in Dupreeh because he can be that follow-up fragger to Hampus, like to help with the entry force of the team. You have Device as your opper, and then you just kind of have to build around that a little bit. It can also free up Rez, I think, to be a little bit more flexible and not have to be the guy, going in behind Hampus or something like that. It can allow him to be a little bit more flexible, maybe make him even more comfortable because he has less pressure on his shoulders to be one of the guys trying to create openings for the team. So I think from the NIP perspective, I think Dupreeh is a perfect, entry-type fragger player that they need to help reinforce the talent of this team. What I would say, though, and it's just something that we kind of talked about the whole Mages thing, is this really the best move for Dupreeh? Like, imagine Dupreeh on FaZe for Rain for a second there.
Oh, that would be banging, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if FaZe is interested in that. I don't know, if Dupreeh would be interested in that. But
certainly,
I think, but
no, just from a GM perspective,
move.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. From the fan perspective, that's the banger move right there. That makes FaZe instantly better. You build town up around Twist and Brokey. You have Kerrigan as your tactician. They still have to figure out a fit situation, I think, for Olaf, which might be Xyp9x. So now you get to recruit two guys who have been playing together on Astralis. Like that's the freaking move I would love to see personally. But let's say that can't happen for whatever reason. Like my dream of like FaZe getting Xyp9x and Dupreeh for Rain and Olaf isn't possible. Then the next best thing probably is NIP, unless you're just force fitting him into heroic for some reason, which doesn't seem right. Like to me, like it doesn't really make much sense. So I think after the FaZe dream, I think the NIP thing is definitely the way to go, in my opinion.
I think it's important to understand as well for the Astralis players and for Dupreeh and Device in particular, right? That they've been indoctrinated in this like Astralis setup, the whole having a big team behind you, the whole having, an office, the whole, trying to be more professional in your approach with Counter-Strike. NIP is trying to copy that, right? They want to build on that. They want to make it better. So I think if you're Dupreeh, if you're Device, you think you're going from something as you said, Thorin, they may not have agreed with CSGO on everything they did, right? They may think that was a little bit over the line. Here they have a chance to go to NIP and build up that project from the bottom, right? They have to go in and say the best stuff within Astralis was this, and this, and whatever the fuck we did over here, we don't want to do that shit again, right? So they have a chance, I guess, of building the perfect home for themselves while still being very, very competitive in the game. I think it's a perfect move for Dupreeh, and I think NIP, if they can secure Dupreeh, I think that'll be absolutely stellar done by them. And they have done some questionable moves when it comes to roster signings and bringing in these youngsters,
Yeah.
Right, prep your takes, because I'm just going to go on a little rant here, right? So first of all,
I'm ready.
I'll start on the angle of, like, if you're NIP. Listen, if you're NIP, it's about the best signing you could do. Like, of all the Astralis players, listen, I'd like to have Glaive as well. Like, that would also be my number one again. Sure. But with that said, I agree with you. I actually think Hampus has been fairly underrated. I even kind of like his playing style in the game. I think he's one of those guys where one thing I've always loved about in-game leaders is if you're an in-game leader who can figure out how to frag within your own system without taking resources, that is such an OP quality. It's one of the factors, actually, if people know the old school 1.6 player, Ave, that was one thing he was very good at. He wasn't some like mad skilled player. He just knew how to do it. Everyone else have their role, run the tactic, and then within the tactic, here's the best spot for me to get a kill or for me to back someone up, And if you can do that, I mean, let's be real, like Glaives was the best ever at probably, but Hampus has been pretty legit in it. Like, he's not one of the players I look at, I see problems with. The only problem I have is, and I also think, by the way, for Device, listen, if this isn't your dream move, it's the move that you literally, like, fucking demanded. Like, I could also believe that. I could believe there's a world, because that's another thing I think as well. Device himself implied with all those comments of like, we're going to build a system here and it's possible. All those comments he made, like, if you get the first win, you can get eras and everything. And, was 5 steps ahead with practice. And I wanted to be the number one player one year. He made it sound, Pimp, like, I don't need anything else. This is just the team, like, just add me to the team. But it's like, listen, Device, you actually taught yourself this year the reason you weren't number one those past years, because you aren't Simple, mate. Like, actually Simple literally could walk in a room with any 4 people at this point in time and actually carry. Like, because he's just not human, mate. Like, you have to understand, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Nobody can do that. Like, Zero himself is looking over going, it's true, nobody can do that. Like, that's how unfair it is. Like, it's like when Michael Jordan played. Listen, there was a lot of really great players in that era who just never won the championship because Michael Jordan played. I'm sorry. So my problem with this is, right, I think for Device, it's the perfect signing. Because not only, again, are those, like I said about before when I was waxing about Magisk and Config, those are 2 great players, 0 role overlap. They also get along together. They get along even better. The others 2 were just teammates, basically. They never had that romantic element. These 2 obviously really like each other, vibe with each other. This is the element I think is perfect to a Device. I think one thing that Device learned from coming to NIP that he didn't realise because of how great he's had it and all those amazing teams over history is when you're the AWPer, you want some comfort as well. You want to know that like players around you are going to play a set way. They're going to cover a certain flank. They've got experience. They know what I'm doing here. Like if you don't have all that stuff, that's why you have to be an eco or a simple, because you have to brute force it at that point in time. You've got like an unideal situation, inefficient squad. And I think what he learned in this team was, it's fucking brutal when players play bad and when you've got a rotating fifth player and it's always inexperienced and then we're swapping out who IGLs, mate. That's a nightmare. I don't think he knew what he was walking into when he went in that team. So if you can get Dupreeh, you already know. Dupreeh liked Device, by the way, in his career. It's unbelievable how few slumps these motherfuckers have had. Like, I don't know what they've done. Them and Simple have just tapped into like the ultimate fountain of youth where it's like, you can just regenerate every 6 months. I don't know how they do it. It doesn't make sense because it's not supposed to work like that. They're having like football type careers where you have like a 10-year career that you're good. In Counter-Strike, you're supposed to fall off every year or, rediscover yourself in a new role every 2 years. Like, so to me, it'd be brilliant. Obviously, as an entry player, he'll be amazing. Like, if you threat, that's your dream as well. I agree with Dust, though. On the other side, ignoring the part about, listen, I do imagine this is probably where Dupreeh wants to go at this point in his career, and I don't think he probably wants to go abroad, etc. If I had to do, like, Football Manager, tell you what, I wouldn't mind Dupreeh on G2 as well. There's a fucking move right there. Because everyone's doing all these moves. Oh, but who could replace Jax if he is like playing hard entry? It's like, mate, you want to play hard entry, motherfucker? I've got one of the original OGs, and guess what?
Yeah.
He's the only one still standing. Guess all of his peers from all that. Bialy and like, mate, they're all gone. They're dead. Freiburg, I know he still plays, but dead now, of course. R.I.P. None of them are around. Like this guy, listen, that's what the doctor ordered. The problem I have is like, I don't think he's going to do a move like that personally.
It'd have to be with Glaive as a combination. I feel like I don't think he would.
That would be cool.
Himself.
That would be cool as well. Yeah. All right, let's do this then. Let's do it. So basically, it was announced, actually, as we're doing this podcast, not that Magisk is going or isn't, but an even more interesting side angle, because this makes it, there's a lot more this actually brings to this table. Complexity's just signed es3tag. So initially, they've just signed es3tag, right? Thoughts, Dust? What do you think?
This is so underwhelming, man. I'm just going to be 100% real about it. It's not even that es3tag is bad. He's a pretty decent player, but let's be honest. His stock got massively inflated over a couple events he played with Astralis. Cloud9 bought into it. And while that whole project had a bunch of other issues, then it probably wasn't just that es3tag didn't play as well as people thought he would based on his inflated like stock on those couple of Astralis stand-in events. Like, I still just, like, if you're Complexity, right? You needed to bring in a banger. You needed to bring in a guy who could frag out hard and could actually be another star player for your team alongside like a Blame F and a Config, unless Poise is going to somehow magically recover at some point, which doesn't seem to be the case. He looks like he's just going to be kind of a decent guy that can create space because he's willing to take a lot of opening duels and create space for his teammates, which is useful in itself that he's an aggressive opper to create that space. There's a lot of oppers out there on top teams that won't do that, a.k.a. Jame, a.k.a. Shiro. At least he's the guy that will go out there and brawl, but he's not putting out the fragging output that the team really needs to go toe-to-toe with some of the other talented rosters out there right now. And so for me, that's why Complexity needed to get a Magus. They needed to get a guy who had the potential to do that. I'm sorry, man. Like, I think es3tag is like a solid player, but he's probably gonna be like your third or fourth best player on the team, which puts even more stress, I feel like, on Config and Blame F to perform. And it just, I don't think it gives the team enough. Like, he probably will perform better than Rush has been performing, because Rush has had like a really rough time, if we're honest, throughout this year. So I imagine that he will have like higher ratings and like higher KD ratios than Rush and can play that same role. I mean, I feel like es3tag is like a Swiss Army knife in that perspective, where he can play a bunch of different roles at a pretty high level. So you can kind of just slot him in as a glue player anywhere. So I think like role wise, and like he will be a slight upgrade to Rush. But all I'm getting at is it's not like the exciting move I feel like that you wanted if you're a Complexity fan. I feel like this is just kind of like almost settling in a way, and I feel like you're probably going to need another blockbuster move, I feel like, to make this team work.
Hopefully Magisk as well. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you need them both, I feel like.
Yeah. What do you think, Pim?
So JKS would have to go then too, I guess.
Oh yeah, that'd be interesting, right? Because
now I'm excited. I'm excited now if you bring in that. Yeah.
I think it's a comfort pick, right? I think es3tag, I agree with you, Josh. I think his repetition was completely being overestimated when he was in Astralis doing well for a couple of tournaments, a couple of games basically, brought into the Cloud9 lineup, and I think the way he thought about himself and the way we had to all of a sudden approach him was that he was supposed to be some sort of a star, and I don't know where that line of thought ever came from, right? Because he was never a star player. I don't think es3tag has ever been a player that I looked towards and had any star potential. He never took over the games. He never took over the server. He was always very solid. I think he's a very smart player. I think he's very cerebral. I think he's very good at playing different roles as well. I think you're spot on when you're saying he's a Swiss Army knife, and I think he can do a lot of different roles within the game. But his best year till this day ever, rating-wise, overall the season is 1.03. Normally, averaging around 1.01. Ever since he went into Tier 1 Counter-Strike, he's not been able to replicate the performance he could when he was in Trick, when he played against Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4 shit teams. So es3tag, to me, if he thinks about himself as a star player, this is a terrible move. If he comes into this lineup thinking, okay, I know my place now. I know I tried to go to Cloud9. I tried to be the AWP player. I tried to be the guy they could rely on. I tried to be the star player. I found out I wasn't good enough for that. I didn't have that skill ceiling. I didn't have that skill cap to do that, but I can still be one of the very best role players, one of the very best supportive elements in the game. If that's the mentality, if that's what he's supposed to do within Complexity, I think he's a massive upgrade to Rush. I think he can be very, very good. And I think he can elevate this team a lot, but it depends on what kind of role he wants first and foremost, what kind of role he gets, and more so what kind of attitude he comes in with. Because I don't think es3tag has it to be one of the best players in Denmark. Honestly speaking, I think he's a good player, but he's been around for forever, and he's never really amazed me in any way. And I may sound rough here, but he can be a good role player and nothing more than that.
That's fair.
Yeah, my problem with this move is, I'll take it just from the es3tag angle first, is like, I do think, unfortunately, he definitely got overinflated in his trials. Like, that goes without saying. Like, people were literally, dude, do you remember this? There was people saying, like, don't even bother bringing Zipmix back. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, whoever that is, throw him out. Like, throw that guy the fuck out the bed. You know what I mean? Like, people were going way too hard on that shit. Then also, when he went to Cloud9 rather, as you say, at one point in time when Kovacevicd was fighting, he had to be the AWPer. And like, mate, the idea, even though I love the idea that someone is a glue guy and he'll say, I'll do whatever you need. It's like, mate, you shouldn't even be saying yes to that move. The answer should be, we need an AWP. Like, I'm not the answer. Like, I could do it for an event, but like, I'm not the full-time answer, because
I'm going to write a book about how they can fuck up your career at some point.
At all.
Yeah, it's bad.
And let's be real, you know this, I just hate when players do that when I don't feel like either A, they can do it, or even worse, I feel like they'll switch back eventually. It's like IGL, if you're going to switch back eventually, like, unless we really just need it for one event, don't do it. Just, let's just get through it and let's just get a guy that can do it. Like, basically, my problem with this move overall, I have to say, let me think out of... I'll say this as well. I do think, though, one thing that was a bit unfair about his time in Cloud9 is I actually do think if you viewed him as a supportive element, he actually played all right. Like, he actually was one of the elements I thought was better. I thought him and Alex and Mezzy, I thought those were the three that were good. I thought it was the others that had either inexperience or when they were, like, Kovacevicd was just bad, wasn't he? Like, so I actually thought they're the ones who sort of got fucked, because remember, those results were actually super close. Like, I thought some of those players were doing their job. The problem is this. Everyone knows, I was part of revealing it, that he got paid fucking megabucks. And the problem is he got paid by the way, he got paid more than like fucking like Simple, etc. So like, if you are getting that money, I'm sorry, like you sort of do have to be a star just the way the game works. Like, and not only do fans know that, Cloud9 knows it. So they're also going to look and go, why did we buy this guy for this much, pay him this much salary if he's not going to be like the best player, at least his role, like even if not in the team. So I think he was painted into a corner. So he could essentially, it was a poison chalice. You have to say yes to the offer, but you can only sort of fail those expectations. Now for the complexity side, there's two ways I can go on this. One is this. I'm just hoping, and this is mad copium pimp, I'm hoping this isn't instead of Magisk. This is with me. Because if it's instead, I'm with Dust. I'm mad underwhelmed. I'm just like, listen, Jason Lake, have you been reading Reddit from a year ago? Like, what the fuck are you... Did you not see... what are you talking about, bro? Instead of Magisk. But if Magisk is coming as well, now I'm hyped. Because now that gives a different dimension. Like, listen, I know es3tag can be Zipmix in that sense. If you want that rounding out element, or even be an entry element, if you want to work with config, I'm sure they'd love working each other. I also think this element... You know that meme? I don't know what kids' program it's from, because I'm a boomer, obviously. You know the meme where there's two pictures? It's sort of a monkey image. One's where he's looking forwards, and then one's where he's looking slightly like to the side of his eye, and it's like, when you're sort of giving someone like the sly eye. This is my joke. That's what fucking Poison's going to be like if Magisk and es3tag, because you're just like, wait a minute, for Danish players, and I know Danish players do prefer to speak Danish, and I've got no chance of learning Danish in the next 6 months because I haven't learned fucking tier 1 AWPing, so I'm saying this is all just fine, right, Jason? Like, yeah, this is fine. And by the way, welcome to the new coaches on it. You know what I mean? Like, give me a break. Like, listen, Poison, all I'm going to say, mate, is get in DM. Just get in that DM. Just live in DM at this point in time, because your days are numbered if 4 Danish players get together like that. Especially because, by the way, as we've been talking about with Hundred and all the different players over the years, The one scene that doesn't lack depth at any particular position, probably the Danish scene. I can tell you right now, like 3 Danish AWPers that are good. So it's going to get rough if that happens. So listen, again, for complexity, if we get Magisk as well, I like the move. I think it's a good move overall. It shows also my ambition. It even shows, like I said before, you really are committing to the idea. We're not an NA org. Yeah. Oh, we're an NA org, but we're not an NA team, rather. Like, maybe we just bring you for the boot camps to the facility.
You have to get the facility aspect of this, I feel like.
In a way,
go into things, I feel like it. Yeah.
But I will say,
you're going to move 4 lanes over NA permanently.
Because the problem is this, they've had those facilities when they had some of the shit lineups before as well. So I will say this, it sounds cool, but if you're not actually putting a world-class team into it, why have them at that point in time? Like, I'd rather say to the fucking Dallas Cowboys guy, listen, I know we're not using the facility much, but I'm trying to get a better team. Like, this might give me, like, the 5th best team or something. So I don't know about that angle. Like, I feel like in general it's a good move, but it's definitely not a blockbuster. Like, this definitely, I mean, the irony of all ironies, of course, is Jason Lake would say, well, what the fuck do I care what you guys say? You all told me that Blame F wasn't the blockbuster when I signed him first. And, so... Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.